Hello, everybody. I'm Kevin Hoare. Welcome to the Captive Audience. It is the 11th of February, 2025. And sorry, we're starting a bit late here. I had a technical problem and I was doomed to start late anyway for a number of different reasons, but I'm glad I'm here. There's so much to share with you today. Every day is amazing. Every day is like washes over us like a tsunami. But you know what? It's a good tsunami because there are a lot of Democrats who are losing their minds because they don't think that we should look into what they've been spending money on for years. And it's time that we do that. Their protesting over this is actually an even better reason to do it. So, anyway, welcome to the show. And yeah, I'm sporting a new hat today. I've had this one for a while, but I know I mentioned that I was going to retire the Let's Go Brandon hat until there was some reason to do otherwise, such as maybe President Brandon reemerging from his sarcophagus. Um, there's so much though to share with you about what's happening in the new Trump administration that I'm just gonna go with it here because we really are making America great all over again. And we're doing it at the expense of the corruptocrats who, frankly, got away with years and years of spending that they had no business doing. They have been running DC and got away with it from one administration to the next. And now they're finally being called out on it. And I think this is actually an important stuff to share with you. A former USAID official warns of corruption in the agency and says Democrats benefited. This is a former executive from inside the U.S. Agency for International Development, which I'm sure actually did help in locating and quickly getting to the stuff that is actually being done in our names using our money by people who didn't think they're really accountable to anybody whatsoever here in the government, much less the people and their elected representatives. This guy, his name is Mark Moyar. He's a former director of the Office of Civilian and Military Cooperation at USAID. In the first Trump administration, he explains that the corruption he saw within the agency and the lack of transparency, and he looks forward to its reduction. So he was there during the first Trump administration. He claims that Democrats have benefited more from the agency's funding than Republicans based on his own personal experience. During the first few weeks of the second Trump administration, a main priority has been to purge USAID. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is now the acting director of USAID, and the Trump administration is getting ready to reduce the agency by thousands of employees. That's right, thousands of employees who spend all their time giving away your money that we're going to need for some other things that I'm going to get to here in just a minute. You're going to find that fascinating too. They've identified us paying for contraceptives in Afghanistan, LGBT diversity programs in European countries, which can well afford to fund those things themselves if they see fit. And so foreign aid in general has been paused and is being reevaluated. The thing is, in the State Department, the people there are cooperating. In USAID, they acted like they didn't have to. That is why they're coming down on them like a ton of bricks, and they should. The Development Agency for years funneled monies to several nonprofits that also received substantial backing from components of George Soros's empire. So they were sort of co-funding stuff. Some previously came under scrutiny during the Obama administration, which they called democracy promotion, as well as judicial reform efforts in European countries. But it was really just promoting leftist politics, for which George Soros is well known. The General Services Administration has confirmed that USAID has been stripped of the lease for its headquarters building in Washington, D.C. In other words, they are not going to be in that building much longer, and they are not going to have employees much longer. and this entire mess is going to be flushed down the toilet as quickly as possible. They've already issued a waiver for all the programs that are truly helping people around the world, that in ways that the United States does intend, such as people who are facing starvation or disease and that kind of thing, but not people who wanted to have a trans play in Ireland. They didn't want it, and we have no business funding it. All of this stuff, and worst of all, they're going to have to get to the bottom of just who decided to spend $26 million buying subscriptions to Politico magazine at $10,000 to $15,000 a pop. Like I said last night, if the Trump administration, if President Trump had decided to go and buy the same amount of subscriptions to Fox Nation or the Wall Street Journal, there would be calls for impeachment and jail and investigations and fines and everything. Democrats aren't interested in getting to the bottom of this, and that's what we're finding out. And Congress has not been able to get information about this stuff until the Trump administration came in and started unearthing all of it. So in other words, they had a whole scheme of hiding this, even from the people's elected representatives, who have every right to know how this money was being spent. So, you know, they tried to do some stuff in the first Trump administration with very limited success, very limited, partly because you actually had problems with Trump appointees that got into some of these roles, according to Mr. Moyar. He said a very senior Trump appointee who was married to the top lobbyist for the aid industry, which is a big problem. So this time around, we don't have that. We are taking a more concerted approach. It's pretty clear. He said last time it was kind of like, we'll peek in, we'll see if we find a few things that we don't like and get rid of them. We're going to take everything out. We have to have evidence that this is actually helping us. The burden should be that it helps the United States. And there's plenty of good causes around the world that can be funded by private charities or other countries whose interests are more centered on those particular items. This has to be stuff that advances the foreign policy and the national security interests of the United States. That's what it's there for. Don't tell me that funding DEI in the Serbian workplace advances either one of those things for the United States. Anyway, they have been working more carefully this time to make sure that the Office of Security, which is in charge of vetting people that are appointed to these positions, don't have these conflicts of interest, don't have these corrupt histories, and don't have the bad attitude and the compromised point of view that they're going to take into these offices with them and undermine the Trump administration themselves. So, and of course, the Office of Inspector General is also supposed to be keeping an eye on this. They've done a terrible job when it comes to USAID, just based on the handful of things that we've found so far. And that's why President Trump removed 20 inspectors general during his first week of office. They just weren't getting the job done. They weren't inspecting in general or in specific. And a lot of stuff was happening that they could have easily gotten to the bottom of. And he said, Democrats basically used this as a $42 billion piggy bank for the stuff that they wanted to fund. Transgender and feminist issues. They said under Samantha Power, who led this agency under Biden, they tried to infuse DEI and transgender into every program. So you'd think it was just for healthcare or economic growth, but instead it would have a DEI or transgender aspect infiltrated into it, into everything the agency does. So, you know, that's a big deal. Somebody who's on the inside who can tell us all this stuff. Now, for some reason, I'm not seeing the stream show up on that I can post these articles. So I'm going to go and see if I can't get into Facebook and post them there. But meanwhile, there's Elon Musk has responded to some of the foaming at the mouth criticism. Let me see if I can get this. Yeah. Okay. Foaming at the mouth criticism. First of all, he pointed out that $100 billion in payments have been made to individuals without any identity. So people without a social security number or even a temporary identity number, he has discovered that $100 billion in annual payments for entitlements are going to people who basically may not even exist. And if they exist, they can't prove that they actually are legitimately who they say they are and in deserving of any benefits. $100 billion. That's money that's not going to other priorities that the country has. And we're being told that we're doing good with it, which is a complete lie. So it is very suspicious. And they're finding this stuff quickly. So a government that was supposed to be inspecting itself apparently wasn't doing that at all. And of course, DOJ is pushing for access to the U.S. Treasury Department payment records, which is where a lot of money is just being sent out. And there's a Judge Paul Engelmeyer, has blocked DOJ from accessing this data. And of course, it's based on claims that have been made by the Democrats that somehow this is that this information is going to be publicized or leaked, where it exposes people's social security numbers, which is total nonsense. They have no evidence to state that. They're just simply speculating, or that some information may actually help Elon Musk in his job, which they also have no evidence. And what I mean by his job, by his private sector ownership of Tesla. And I think everybody knows that there's really no reason why someone would go and spend all this time doing this when they're already like a trillionaire, unless they had their best interest at heart. Going in and trying to do something to get more money out of the government for themselves is the last thing that they should be trying to convince anybody is actually being done by Elon Musk. That is the dumbest thing of all. The people they should be watching are the people who have been getting all this aid and who they support. And I think we actually have a pretty good idea from that whistleblower what is actually happening. So Musk came out and he defended DOJ. He claims he wants to add common sense controls to the federal government. He said that the people voted for major government reform, and that's what the people are going to get. That's what democracy is all about. If your money is spent badly, he said, if your taxpayer dollars are not spent in a sensible or critical manner, then that's not okay. Your tax dollars need to be spent wisely on things that matter. And he's found all kinds of examples of things that don't matter. And he said, there are people still receiving paychecks despite being 150 years old and quite possibly dead from the Social Security Administration. They're finding this. If someone wants to say it's just an error, nevertheless, that's what the government's own data is telling them. And this has to be exposed and has to be stopped. He said, I'm not going to, some of the things I will find or say will be incorrect and it should be corrected. And he's happy to correct them. He said, nobody's going to bat 1,000. We will make mistakes, but we're acting quickly to correct mistakes. And that is the key here, is that they are going at a zillion miles an hour, and it's smart. He said, we had no idea we're going to find this much fraud and corruption in the federal government, according to President Trump. They really just didn't expect to find that. It's almost like all you had to do is open your eyes and start doing searches in databases, and all this stuff's coming out. So, more power to them, and more power to the people who are fighting in court against what the Democrats are doing to try and block the effort to get to the bottom of this. The United States Appeals Court in Massachusetts, gee, I wonder why they filed in Massachusetts, has refused to intervene in a lower court judge's order to the Trump administration to unfreeze billions of dollars in federal grants and loans. So, in other words, this judge has come in and unfrozen funding that was frozen by President Trump so that it could be placed under review. This is the order stems from funds that were expected to be paused by the White House Office of Management and Budget because they would like to manage the budget and see what we're actually spending money on. So this has gone to the First Circuit Court of Appeals, which is favorable to the Democrats. And he said the administration failed to comply with the plain text of this order that was issued. And the Justice Department argued that the money for clean energy projects and transportation infrastructure were exempt from the initial order because they were paused under a different memo. So there's some conflict about standing and whether or not the judge's order could be issued as sweepingly as it was. We went through this in the first Trump administration, and they issued these nationwide injunctions and sweeping orders that covered wide swaths of things, sometimes exceeding the scope of the original case that was filed, just because that judge felt like it. And we're going to have to fight through all of these things. So there's a lawfare component to this. The Democrats are masters at lawfare, and they're masters at demagoguery and rhetoric, and we're going to have to combat them at every step of the way. So I think we're going to have to find out if the president's actually in charge of the executive branch, or if actually this is some judges who just feel differently about how the executive branch should be run, or the laws faithfully executed. You know, this is one of the problems that we face, is that the Democrats have created a morass of a system that's literally biased in favor of being unable to do anything about fixing the system. And maybe our judicial system has to be dealt with too. I'm just suggesting that because if you don't deal with the people who are effectively in cahoots, being a party to interfering with and frankly exceeding the authority of the judicial branch in trying to run the executive branch, then we have to get back to the point where the judicial branch actually just runs the judicial branch and not 18 other things that they find when the law actually says something, and not when they feel differently than the president about how the executive branch should be run. So I'm just checking out here right now to see if I can find you guys here on Facebook and see if we're actually streaming, because I always do that just in case something has gone wrong. By the way, speaking of reform and judicial overreach, Representative Eli Crane has spotlighted Judge Engelmeyer's actions as judicial overreach. He's an Arizona Republican member of Congress. He's drafting impeachment articles for a judge who blocked the DOJ from accessing Treasury Department information. Partisan judges abusing their positions is a threat to democracy, he wrote on X. Earlier this week, Engelmeyer issued a temporary restraining order that prevented DOJ from getting full access to the Treasury Department, even though the president runs the executive branch and is the only one who should be issuing any of these orders. 19 Democrat state attorney generals, which I know includes Oregon, argued that DOJ having full access to the department would violate the law, even though DOJ is a creation of the president and the White House and is charged with the authority to perform the president's directive on finding and rooting out fraud, corruption, waste, and abuse. But apparently, these Democrats believe it's illegal. So, Judge Engelmeyer is attempting to stop White House employees from accessing the very systems they oversee. Where in the Constitution does it says the president and his team cannot root out obvious waste, fraud, and abuse? The hearing is set for this Friday, February 14th. This is going to be a major moment, because I do believe actually that maybe this is the only way that we can get the attention of all these folks who think they actually run major here. Sorry, that's my I do believe that's me talking to me. I think that this is something that we will find out who actually runs the government. When you elect a president, is the president in charge of the executive branch? Period. Are they allowed to engage in their job, or is this going to have to go all the way to the Supreme Court because we've got somebody who is frankly standing in the way? And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and post the rest of these articles now. Hopefully you can now get caught up on the stuff that I was talking about earlier. Sorry for the delay in that, but it's hard to type a password while you're talking, and I didn't want to leave you guys hanging. So, and I appreciate you rolling with the punches here with me. Now, this is in this article, by the way, that talks about the $1 billion or $100 billion in annual entitlements to individuals without Social Security number or even temporary identity. Gosh, who do you think that might be? Who would come in? Who might be in this country without any form of identification, getting payments from the government? Golly jeepers, who could that be? You know, I'm not even going to fill in the blank on that. I'll let you do that, because if it's not somebody who's a fraudster, that there's some innocent explanation for this. It doesn't get any more innocent than perhaps saying it's got to be people who've entered the country illegally and frankly don't have the ability to get these forms of identification legally, though many of them have forms of identification that they've obtained illegally, like stealing somebody's Social Security number and identity. Anyway, here's the Democrats' reaction. Oregon's making the news once again. This is hot off the press. Our brand new congressional representative, who has replaced the bow-tied buffoon Blumenauer in the 3rd congressional district after 3 decades. Her name is Maxine Dexter, and she had just apparently was at a rally against President Trump and Elon Musk, and she said that we have to say, you know, even though I don't curse publicly very much, she goes, we have to F Trump. She says, I don't swear in public very well, but we have to F Trump. This is a member of Congress. This is apparently policy dialogue that she's expressing. And she goes, please don't tell my children that I just did that. That's about the dumbest thing you could have possibly said. Thinking, well, this is in the news, Maxine. So we've got another moron from Oregon who is going around saying F this and F that, enhancing the dialogue, the political dialogue. Look, I don't want to hear about mean tweets when we've got this kind of stuff going on, because frankly, I don't see a lot of mean tweets. I see honest tweets from President Trump. But Maxine Dexter, this is about as bad as the dialogue can get, to be honest, except that some people are actually calling for violence. And that's something that you're going to see. There's a pastor, a leftist religious pastor, who says that sometimes violence is necessary and there's going to be bloodshed. That's what we're getting right now when we try to shut down USAID for acting as a political slush fund for the Democrats. Representative Janice Schakowsky from Illinois said, we're going to beat, I was going to say F, but no, I'm not going to say that. We're going to beat and we're going to pull him, Trump, down. Sounds like a physical threat, actually. Representative Mark Pocan, Democrat of Wisconsin, joined in saying F Donald Trump, but added, and F Elon Musk. Apparently, this is how the Democrat message is evolving. And Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut said the party's response has been too weak and inconsistent to combat Trump. And so this is their way of apparently responding to President Trump in some constructive and effective way. They're describing this as a crisis over federal spending. Yeah, it's a crisis that the Democrats created. Trump's cleaning up, and the Democrats know that it's a political emergency if they don't stop. And by the way, I heard something great. I'm just gonna tell you that this is one of the best things I heard all day. It was, I believe it was on Jesse Waters' show, and he reads letters from people that are writing in. And here's the letter. The person who wrote in said Doge, and it said Doge means Democrats officially getting exposed. Doge. I love it. That is that really encapsulates it. And you know what? It didn't have to be. Democrats could have said, we want to get to the bottom of this too. We don't want waste. We don't want people spending money on political activities and items. But no, they've decided that this is a crisis over federal spending, and F Trump and F Elon Musk. Of course, the union leaders, a lot of them public employee union leaders, as we know, joined into a series of a cappella songs attacking Musk, accusing him and other billionaires of trying to divide us by our color and divide us by our tongue. I haven't heard Elon Musk say anything about that. So they're living in this fantasy world. And he says, we're going to fight Doge. We're going to fight Elon Musk. They sang that to the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which is like offensive. The CNN panel that was listening to all of this montage of Democrats had to hold back their laughter. One clip showed Representative Maxine Waters and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer holding hands and chanting, "We will win, we won't rest." Just before, on February 5th, they went off and took their naps because that's what they do. So, Maxine Waters, we can see that you're now on the job, and you've decided to make your mark by, frankly, cursing about the president in public and joining people in a chorus that want to fight against transparency and accountability. Now, they're also going apoplectic in all of the research institutions such as OHSU because they believe that they stand to lose millions in national institutes of health payments. There's going to be a cap of a 15% cap on indirect funding that institutions receive as part of research grants. These funds pay for building maintenance, supplies, support staff, and other administrative expenses tied to conducting research. And many universities and research institutes previously received indirect funding at the rate of 50%. So that means that when one of these institutions goes and decides, we need to do research, we just need money to do the research. The money for the research they receive, and then in many cases, they get another 50% on top of that to subsidize that institution's administrative overhead to exist, which frankly means at some point that the federal government is just funding these entities lock, stock, and barrel. If you're paying for 50% more than the research, you're paying for the institution, not just the research. And of course, a judge has temporarily halted these funding cuts on Monday based on a lawsuit brought by Oregon and 21 other states. And that's providing the time for the states and the public research institutions to make their case. So they're going to get their day in court. OHSU, by the way, received $277 million from the National Institutes of Health in 2024, according to federal data. That included $73.6 million of it in indirect costs. And then OHSU's interim president, said that the university's indirect cost reimbursement rate needs to be 56%. Each institution typically negotiates its own reimbursement rate with the government as a flat percentage that gets added to each grant award. He said the university's current negotiated rate does not cover it. You know what? I think I've got a solution to this. Let's take this issue directly to Congress, who appropriated this money, and they can set the reimbursement rate. If they don't like 15%, then they can change it. But right now, all of these institutions are mopping up huge cash dollars, not for research, but for their operating costs at the taxpayer's expense. If they say they can't do the research unless all of their administrative and operating costs are covered, then actually should that institute just be run by the federal government directly? I mean, it's effectively being entirely subsidized, and yet whatever that institution is supposed to be doing in terms of being its own self-funding, it's a fantasy, it's a fiction. It really isn't what's happening. They're actually being funded entirely by the National Institutes for Health. That means we're, by the way, and let me tell you, that means we are getting less research so that we can fund administrative activities that these institutions say they can't afford to pay for. Really? Okay. Well, we're going to get less research. We could be spending $73 million more on research and not subsidizing OHSU with federal dollars, because that money should be going to research. That's what the National Institutes for Health is supposed to do, health research, not pay everyone's bills. So, and by the way, we need this money. Let me give you an example of what we need it for. Trump officials have asked the Senate GOP for $175 billion for immigration enforcement and securing the border. Border czar Tom Homan and the White House OMB director Russ Vought met with Senate Republicans on Tuesday to discuss funding for their plans for border security and immigration enforcement. The chair of that committee, Lindsey Graham, who, by the way, is up for re-election, so I'm sure he's going to be paying very close attention to this, told reporters that the Trump administration is asking for $175 million to secure the border, $1 billion to secure the border. During the meeting, the pair reportedly said the high ticket cost would be spent on new ICE agents, detention beds, and other deportation resources. By the way, all of this is caused by the failure of the Biden administration to keep people from entering the country illegally. So this is all the consequence of Biden letting people into the country, which itself cost money. And now, because of that, we have no choice but to get money to do the enforcement job that, by the way, the American people elected Donald Trump to do. That's what they elected him to do. And he's keeping his promise. But we're going to have to do that. And we're also going to cover the costs of finishing construction on the border wall, which the Biden administration was trying to take the steel girders. I saw them myself. I touched them. They were lying all over the ground at the Yuma sector area of the border wall. And the Biden administration was trying to sell these for 5 cents on the dollar. That's what they were trying to do. So no wonder things cost money. When people waste money and let people into the country and then cause us to incur these massive costs. And that's on top of the hundreds of billions of dollars that we're already paying to subsidize every person that comes here for free health care, for housing, sometimes just giving them spending money, walking around money, debit cards. So, you know, this request for funding comes as Graham's committee prepares to pass its budget resolution on Wednesday. He also plans to approve $150 billion to expand military spending because, as you know, we've been left virtually defenseless by the Biden administration as they've drained our ammunition supplies and caused our Navy to be depleted to historically low levels, while we're facing threats around the world who are watching what we're doing to see if we're going to actually reverse the course and do the right thing. So this is going to be a big deal. This has got to happen. And Trump has said that uh, that they're going to get this done. Graham has said that they're going to get this done. And he said, we're not building a wall, folks. We're hitting a wall. They need money and they need it now. So it's kind of an emergency. So that's where this money needs to go. No wonder Chuck Schumer and Maxine Waters are losing their freaking minds. Their effing minds, as they like to curse at President Trump. Back here in Oregon, local ICE activity and sanctuary protections are kind of getting into the news. Both Oregon and Washington. So the Wasco County Sheriff Lane McGill reported that ICE contacted his office once since President Trump began his second term. ICE detained one individual held in Clecatac County Jail during the same period. Hood River Police Lieutenant Don Shelley was not aware of any federal operations in Hood River, but they are ongoing around the country. They've arrested 8,276 people, which is a fraction of the easily 11 million plus that were let into the country. And as we know, 650,000 people with criminal records were let into the country. ICE actually reported that last fall on the day that Kamala Harris went to visit the border for one of the only times she ever did. And now McGill has said we can't aid or assist. We can't use any public resources. Any federal agency that's doing immigration enforcement is not even allowed in our conference rooms, he said. So there needs to be some changes to federal law that allows federal law to override state law when it comes to making sure that the federal government can do its job and not be interfered with or inhibited by state law. It's one thing for the state not to actively use its police officers to go out and seek people that ICE is looking for. But if someone's sitting in a jail who's wanted on a ICE detainer and ICE, according to Oregon state law, is not even allowed to enter the building or ask them to take any action to assist them, and that they have to go and obtain an administrative warrant from a judge, then actually this is really just an effort to slow everything down. And the Trump-affiliated nonprofit America First Foundation sent a letter to Governor Tina Kotek warning of federal prosecution over Oregon sanctuary status, and the new U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has pledged to withhold transportation funding from states that failed to comply with federal immigration enforcement in late January. And they've actually provided in this article the information needed to report a sanctuary violation to Oregon's Department of Justice. So, the state which can't seem to stop fentanyl from streaming into the country and has seen rising crime and rampant homelessness and running out of money for everything, has apparently unlimited time and resources to go and defend its sanctuary laws so that criminals can sleep safe at night in the state of Oregon. So this is a battle that's afoot, but there is also going to be some changes at the federal level. So coming back to this, I think this is going to be very interesting. Lawmakers here in Oregon, Republicans, are aiming to modernize the sanctuary laws. That's about how it's been described. Our communities should not be sanctuaries for murderers, rapists, and other violent criminals. This bill, House Bill 3551, is a common sense policy that protects Oregonians and immigrant communities living in Oregon by holding the most violent criminals accountable. This was introduced by State Representative Alec Skarlatos from Canyonville. You might remember him from running for Congress, being in a movie about his own life and stopping that terrorist attack on a plane or on a train traveling near Paris. And of course, being on Dancing with the Stars. He said, our legislation provides a partial fix to our state's sanctuary state law by allowing state and local law enforcement to work with federal authorities to identify and remove illegal immigrants who have criminal convictions for the most heinous crimes. Oregon state sanctuary state law is extreme and out of touch with the vast majority of Oregonians who want to live in safe neighborhoods, said Representative Christine Drazan, a sponsor of the bill. So, but Democrats will have none of it. I think the bill probably won't go anywhere and probably not even get a hearing. But the ahead of the 2025 legislative session, a statewide poll commissioned by House Republicans revealed that 69% of Oregonians support deporting undocumented immigrants who've been convicted of a crime while in the United States. Only 19% of Oregonians support the Oregon House Democrats' position that no new immigration policies are needed to keep our communities safe. It was conducted at the beginning of January, this poll. So pretty fresh, right before the administration took office, and of course, right after the election. Representative Reschke has said that Democrat leaders have doubled down and pledged to shield violent criminals who should have never been in our country in the first place by defending Oregon's extreme sanctuary state law. This is common sense legislation supported by 69% of Oregonians. So Tina Kotek has pledged to uphold Oregon's sanctuary laws, and Attorney General Dan Rayfield, the guy who pretended that he was going to reduce crime, even though he himself has a criminal history, has added resources towards what he calls the Sanctuary Toolkit and guidance to shield undocumented immigrants from federal law enforcement, even those who've committed violent crimes. This is where it's at. This is Oregon versus, this is the Oregon Democrats versus common sense, the people of Oregon, and Donald Trump. In other news, just to share with you, there's some interesting stuff happening on the investigatory front. Republican leader and former gubernatorial candidate Christine Drazan is demanding an investigation of the FTX contribution that helped defeat her in 2022. It was a $500,000 contribution that was intentionally misreported. That came from one of the top executives at FTX, the defunct, corrupt cryptocurrency company. And that $500,000 contribution went to the Democrat Party of Oregon, and it was investigated by the former Democrat Party of Oregon communications director. You just can't make this stuff up. Yeah. It wouldn't even be believable, but that the Molly Woon, who was appointed to lead the state's election division after the 2022 election, fined the Democrat Party of Oregon $15,000 on May 11th, 2023, and called the matter closed. Now, Matt Wand, a former state representative and Republican state representative, is the lawyer for Christine Drazan's campaign and has written to Secretary of State Tobias Read saying many Oregonians have long questioned just how expansive and corrupting this huge donation, one of the largest in Oregon's history, to a statewide political party, has been the ordinary process in our state government. And so they're demanding an investigation, transparency, and a full accounting. I don't know if we'll get it. One of the problems in this state is that Democrats they're fundamentally corrupt, and they will not investigate their own corruption, and they refuse to get to the bottom of it and hold people fully accountable. Because guess what? It worked. It helped them win in 2022 in a very close election. And I think there's a good chance they'll just keep doing it, actually. Now, the Department of Justice, which is under new management, Pam Bondi, is in consultation with Tobias Read and discussing the contents of this letter. Tobias Read is sort of making warm noises that your assertions that requires statutory process were not followed by the previous Secretary's administration. Those are legal matters, especially given the concerns you raised about this agency's compliance with Oregon law. I'd be hesitant to move forward without guidance from the Attorney General's office. Dan Rayfield, the same guy who's spending all of his time trying to stop stop the Trump administration from deporting criminal illegal aliens. However, the Department of Justice has said we are currently working with the Secretary of State's office to provide them with guidance and legal advice. This is the State Department of Justice, but they cannot share any further details. So they're pretty busy trying to figure out what excuse they're going to come up with to basically deep six this. I think it's time that there be some federal dimension to this, because even though this was a state race and a state election, there were federal elections on the ballot. They were affected by what took place with the Democrat Party of Oregon. And these guys are sitting in federal prison right now that did this stuff, because they were prosecuted under federal law for other actions that they were taking, including stealing this money from their own cryptocurrency depositors in order to do it. Couple other stories. Just following up, the state Senate Republican caucus has a good editorial in the Oregon Catalyst that was published that you should take a look at. We pay more for schools, and yet the test scores are dropping. And Daniel Bonham said, enough is enough. We keep throwing money at a broken system while our kids fall further behind. Families and students, not bureaucracy, need to be at the center of this conversation. And of course, it follows on to there was a Wall Street Journal article, because Democrats passed Senate Bill 744, eliminating the essential skills requirement for high school graduation in 2021. In the aftermath of COVID, they said, we don't need anybody to actually be able to read and do math. And Wall Street Journal editorial board wrote an editorial at that time entitled "Dumbing Oregon Down: The Soft Bigotry of Low Progressive Expectations for Minority Students." But it's gotten worse. Literally all students are behind in the state of Oregon that were reliant upon this public education system. And this is a very partisan thing that they did. There was no Republicans that supported Senate Bill 744. And now there's an entire generation of students who have been betrayed. So what's going to happen? Well, hopefully we are building a case for what's going to take place in the next election, even if Democrats just outright refuse to do anything about their education failure. They are trying to figure out, it's a House Bill 3383 is going to increase the marriage license fee from $25 to $35, a 40% increase. And it also increases the record search fee or an official request fee from $3.75 to $5, a 33% increase. Supporters are requesting the fee hikes to pay for county expenses, with election-related expenses being among the top rising costs. This is especially true for Multnomah County, which has both ranked choice voting for the city of Portland and a complete bureaucracy of campaign finance laws. City and county, they do not exist anywhere else in Oregon. So they have their own campaign finance laws, which makes it almost a nightmare to comply with all of the reporting that they require, in addition to state. And of course, if you're a federal candidate, there's federal. The 2024 elections, the city elections had to place ads and do costly public education campaigns to educate citizens on how ranked choice voting works. In the end, it failed because 20% of voters skipped the ranked choice voting elections. It cost more and drove voters away. Sounds like failure to me, but now they want to be able to have this significant increase in marriage fees and public records fees to pay for a system of ranked choice voting, which is literally a morass that people don't understand, don't see, and it drives voters, particularly voters that struggle with voting to begin with, out of the voting process. So I think that this is, again, a classic Oregon moment. They're going to raise more money, and they're going to use it to pay for something that is a complete disaster, a failure, and should have never been done. But if you voted in Multnomah County or in Portland, you actually know what a ridiculous experience that was. No one really knows how some of the people who won, by the way, including the for mayor. They're all trying to figure out. People are still trying to figure out what the effect of their vote was when they had to vote for 6 ranked choices. By the way, Democrats, it's the economy, stupid. According to the Taxpayers Association Foundation of Oregon, the Oregon Employment Department reported in December that Oregon had lost 3,700 jobs, private sector jobs in hospitality, manufacturing, and financial activities, as well as retail jobs. However, the December's gains, there were some gains, and they were the largest in the healthcare and social assistance fields. 1,900 jobs, which that's a growing sector as people get older. Social assistance, that's largely government funded, actually, which is people getting homelessness services and so on. And the government grew by 700 jobs, and the private sector shrank by 3,700. That's Oregon. That's why they're going to keep raising taxes. And until you get rid of the people who are making these decisions, they're going to keep doing it. By the way, Tina Kotek plans to hire another 1,200 people in a government hiring spree, while Oregon is seeing Intel, Nike, Wells Fargo, and OHSU all cutting jobs. So, of course, maybe OHSU is going to cut more jobs because they are actually so significantly government funded. But then who knows? Maybe Tina Kotek will make up for the difference. We're in a state that isn't representing and serving the people of the state in the way that those people deserve to be served. And now we have an opportunity to correct it in 2026, but we've got to get the word out. We've got to let people know. They have no idea that government is growing while the private sector shrinks. That really the government of Oregon isn't solving the problems that the people of Oregon face. They're just spending more money on not solving those problems and even making them worse, while fighting the Trump administration, who's actually trying to solve the problems that in one particular case, 69% of Oregonians support what the president's doing. So time to solve these problems. And basically, if the Democrats want to stand in the way of it, some of them will have to be defeated politically. Others may find themselves facing criminal charges for obstructing federal law enforcement. And you know what? I think they know President Trump will do it. But Maxine Dexter, her answer, F Trump. You know what, Maxine? I have a few choice words for you, but I'm gonna take the high road tonight and just say, Maxine, get busy doing this. All right? Do that, and you'll deserve to be reelected. If you keep spouting off things at rallies and cursing about the president instead of making constructive policy suggestions, then that's your legacy. That's what you're going to have to live with, and that's what your kids are going to have to live with, cursing and all. Anyway, I want to wish all of you a fine evening. Thanks for hanging in there with me tonight and with the technical and other delays. And I hope you guys enjoyed the show. We should be back tomorrow night with another episode of The Captive Audience. I am working on getting some guests, and hopefully you can benefit from hearing from some of these fabulous guests in the coming couple of weeks. Meanwhile, let's do our part to let everybody know what I talked about in today's show and what's going on in general and what people can do about it. There's a lot they can do about it. You can easily just send an email or submit testimony online and make your voice heard. Register your outrage. with the things you heard that people, the leadership of Oregon are engaging in. And frankly, tell your friends and neighbors what's happening. If they don't believe it, share the show with them, share the articles with them. And I know that if we do our part to fight for the truth and fight for what actually solves the problems our nation and our state face, we can eventually come out on top in these elections too. We're the grand optimistic party, and let's live our creed. Anyway, have a great night, and I'll see you on next week, and you will see Sunny and Dawn tomorrow night on the next episode of The Captive Audience. Have a good night, everyone.